Welcome again, everyone. Today is Saturday the 7th. Everybody on?
Jim here?
Yes, sir.
Dave?
Dave's here.
All right.
Dave's here.
Good. Everybody's loud and clear. All right. So it was a big week. A lot of action in the gold market. Action with financial news coming out. So, Denny, why don't you go ahead and start firing questions.
You bet. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I think we all appreciate the chance to listen to the perspective of Jim and Bill and Dave. Let me set this up a little bit differently. The Independence Day celebrations have come and gone, and more than likely all those celebrations didn't change a thing in anybody's mind about the economy or politics, anything to do in the United States. It was a nice day. Here in the Midwest, it was hotter than blue bloody blazes, and if the farmers don't get a crop in soon, it's going to be a disaster. Employment numbers continue to impress, but many folks and I for one, find them just hard to believe. There's drama in Washington, D.C. that continues unabated. The House of Representatives appear totally distracted from the business of the legislature and only want to focus on Trump. And Trump continues tweeting as a direct refutation to mainstream media. Mainstream media seems totally focused on Trump. I mean, it just goes round and round and round. And in the midst of all of this, all of a sudden, trade talks are back in the news. Trump becomes the first American president to step foot on North Korean soil. So here we are. So what better time to get the boys together for some perspective. So on the call, here we go. Jim, first up.
Hey, Denny, somebody dropped
Yes,
out.
sir?
I'm not sure whether it was Dave or Jim. I heard the click.
I'm here.
Okay, Jim's going to have to call back in.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started with you then, Bill. We'll keep this moving. This week, President Trump had two nominees for the Federal Reserve. One of them was a name that I think many of us knew, Miss Shelton, and she has quite a reputation as a supporter of gold. I didn't know the other fella, but I am interested in your take on what Mrs. Shelton's appearance on the Federal Reserve might mean.
Well, she's definitely pro-gold, and subscribers, actually even public, I think I put it on the public side right after the day after the election. My first post was people would do well to learn who Judy Shelton is. The reason being, I can't say I thought she was going to be appointed to the Federal Reserve because she's a great fit, but not a good fit from a mainstream standpoint because she's pro-gold. Back in, I believe it was 1998, 99, in that era, she was talking about gold being marked up. Now, remember, back then you were talking about $300 gold, and she was talking about gold was going to be marked up to $10,000 an ounce. The gold that the IMF holds would then back the SDR, and the SDR would be used for trade settlement as opposed to the dollar. So, I mean, that's 20 years ago. She was way, way ahead of the curve and extremely pro-gold. It's going to be interesting. My question is whether or not she gets approved or not. I give it less than a coin flip that she actually does get approved, but I'd love to see it.
I'm not familiar with the nomination and approval process. Is it the consent of the Senate? Is that what takes place?
I believe it is the Senate. I don't want to talk out of school. That's something I don't know, but I do believe it is the Senate.
Hi, Jim.
You're back.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Jim, I'm going to put you right on the skillet here. When it comes to the commodities, I was never a trader. I was a hedger. And since I've never been a trader, the action in gold seems to me to be like a street fight. I mean, it's like the West Side Story, the Jets and the Sharks are fighting. Jim, sort of bring us up to speed as a trader, just exactly what is going on in the trading platform with gold and even silver right now? What's really taking place?
Well, last week was an example of what markets look like when electronics become the moving factor of managed money. We pretty well eliminated what you might call retail in everything. And so markets have come down to be electronics and hobbyists, if you will, people who just can't stop, or the people who can't stop going to a gambling casino, for that matter. Now, you have one very popular type of algorithm now, which reads headlines and gives orders according to the headline figures. And in that algorithm, any indication of economic expansion, anything that could be considered to stimulate higher interest rates or even just stop lower interest rates, or let's even take it a bit further, have them go sideways, is going to be considered to be extraordinarily negative for gold, and should be considered positive for general equities. It went into total confusion when the equity market dropped as significantly as it did along with the gold market, and caused the predictable event of different algorithms fighting each other. So the brawl you saw going on is not a brawl between people like myself, yourselves, and a Harry Dent, all willing to take tremendous personal risk, with representatives on the floor of an open outcry exchange, not a computer mill, basically moving according to their instructions, and not moving our money, but moving tremendous amounts of capital that the banks, institutions, and very large tech investors have committed to the algorithms. It's almost a set of circumstances which would be better to erase from your memory, because you had machine fight machine. You had people look at a down stock market and yell, hell, it should go up. You had people look at the gold market and say, how in the world can the U.S. be in a booming economy when today German figures, a major economy, have just reported dismal, literally dismal results? So the logic, the only conclusion I think the listeners and we can come to, or we can come to advise the listeners, is that those numbers we're looking at are not reliable. The statistics we're looking at are so adjusted since 1970 that they constantly will move to what is best for general markets in the economy. And also, the dollar is in a very precarious position right now, more precarious than people are willing to admit. And when you add that to the equation, nothing made sense, according to the headlines, if in fact the headlines are to be accepted and are truly correct and honest. They're not.
Hey, Jim. The unemployment number came out at, 224,000, and 102,000 of that was the plug-in number, the birth-death model. So the real number, rather than 224, was 122. And as far as gold is concerned, this past week, if you were watching carefully, big change. We had the big hit on Monday, completely reversed on Tuesday, and then you had the big hit Friday morning, down $25, $30. It ended up down 15, and the HUI, which was down I think $8 or $9, closed down only 167. You never ever saw that. I'm going to say in the last at least 10 years, you've not seen any action like that. You've not seen two-way action. Usually when gold gets smashed, it's smashed for the day and lays on the floor dead. But that's changed.
Gold, Bill, is far from dead. Gold started in the middle of the last month, a move which is going to bring it back not only to the old high for certain, but will establish significant new highs above that, along with the need to reset. And the key element in this equation right now is really the dollar, and its position at this moment is technically extremely precarious.
All right, can I jump in here a minute, guys?
Sure. Dave.
On the dollar front, Jim, you and I had a conversation several weeks ago when Trump was berating Mario Draghi for keeping the euro cheap and, disadvantaging the United States. And at that time, we said that the race was on to the bottom against all currencies, against gold. And when you saw Trump come out this week and state that maybe it's time, to devalue the dollar, well, it seems quite obvious at this stage of the game that all the major players, all the major countries know what is about to take place. It's the little people who are about to find out. So we'll see how this goes forward. But, the volatility easily, it's going to shake people out, that's for sure. So let's see where this goes.
Well, one of my careers, did you ever hear that before, David?
Yeah.
Maybe we should get into the game of currency manipulation. Oh, we're in the game, we know that. But on the downside.
Jim, I read this week that there was this bag of economic stimulant, and the central banks don't have that bag anymore, whether it's the Central Bank of Japan or the European Central Bank. They literally have nothing left to keep their control going. So Draghi's, bragging about a flourishing Europe, and at the same time he's talking about lower interest rates. Japan, they're talking about negative interest rate, and that's just going to kill their retired population, their pensioners. Jim, if all this takes place, what will happen next? If they go full negative interest rate, what happens, Jim?
Well, it's once you've gone negative, unless there's a very significant anomaly that impacts the economy in a positive way, you're really stuck negative. And we're only in the process of returning back to that because, as Bill has explained multiple times, the impact on capital of negative interest rates is absolutely contrary to the expansion of business and the creation of prosperity. So you'd almost think that the statement by the president on the U.S. dollar was only because he knows, and we know, is only one direction it's going to end up going, as the last pillar holding it up of settlement mechanism is shifting now, has been for a long time, but is now shifted away from contracting in U.S. dollars around the world. So the action that Bill reviewed in the market is, in a fundamental sense, explains each market in the strange way it went. And Draghi better go back and check his figures, because his most recent figures don't support an ebullient Germany or an ebullient euro economy. We're watching mope at a point of desperation. And I honestly do think that what you gentlemen have concluded about the deep state in a bit of a panic is also absolutely true. So the only stimulation out there that's left is either infrastructure building on a massive scale or war. There is no other alternative.
I hope you're not right. I hope you're not right on that. But
those are the two. And we don't have monetary policy because it would be direct and immediate debt monetization, because the only buyers of increased levels of sovereign debt is the sovereigns themselves. And
Bill,
then you're looking at worldwide hyperinflation.
Yeah. Bill, let's back up just a little bit. You wrote that piece this week that I really appreciated. But for the listeners, you wrote about negative interest rates. And Jim just said once you go negative, you can't go back. But specifically, you said that, and I checked your figures, and you're pretty doggone close, $13.4 trillion in foreign bonds at negative interest rates.
Right.
This is just bizarre, Bill, and yet you laid it out very logically. Can you, for the listeners, why in the world can we have negative interest rates?
Why can we or why can't we?
Well,
I'd rather explain
how
can
we?
That's
I
easier
mean,
to explain.
If I give them $100 and then negative interest rates are going to give me back 98, really? I don't get it.
That is what negative interest rates. That's how it works. Now, the biggest, in my mind, the biggest problem is the world has set up pensions for the last 100 years. And those pensions are based on, let's just use a round number of 7%. I think it's 7 or 8% worldwide is what pensions, what the assumption of growth is. Now, if you're putting money into debt, into the credit markets, you can't get even close to those yields now. But when you get into negative rates, like you said, you give them $100, you get 98 back. It's going to absolutely destroy the ability for people to retire. And the most important thing that people should understand is that in today's world, debt is considered wealth, and that's it's ridiculous, but that's where we are now. The world believes that debt is wealth. And what they're going to find out is that debt is not only an asset, but it's also a liability. The debt, first off, there's too much debt to even be paid off. And secondly, once you attach negative interest rates to debt, what does that do to the asset side of it?
It's a lose-lose.
Yeah.
It's a lose-lose. Let me pivot here just a minute. Dave, I'm coming to you because of my appreciation for your perspective. I'm not going to talk about North Korea and the optics of that, but I will say this. A couple of world events happened this week that were on the down low. The first one was Vice President Pence was on the tarmac and ready to take off in Air Force Two to head to a speaking engagement, and he was called back to the White House. I thought that was really weird. And then the second was the Russian submarine had a fire and a dozen more of those sailors passed. Now, there's rumors of a high-energy weapon being used against this submarine. But the whole idea, this all happened concurrently on the same day. Dave, what do you think happened? Are these two events related, or what do you think happened?
I can't speculate. And when I say I can't speculate, I could not point to anything that remotely would seem like I had an intelligent opinion, so I would just be guessing. I would guess they're not related would be my initial reaction. Whether or not an incident took place and we attacked the submarine, I'm not sure I'm ready to go there because I have no information that could lead me in that direction. And as far as the Pence movement, there's so many things that could have taken place at any given moment that would have caused that to happen. You can get a phone call of a hoax, or a situation like they knew they were going to take down the tanker. And again, and I sent you guys an article, you probably haven't seen it yet, or actually it was just a fact. 91% of England's oil comes out of Qatar and has to pass through the Persian Gulf. So are we setting up the stage for World War III? I mean, if you want to provoke Iran into a fight, you just stole a whole tanker full of oil. You stole it. That's not yours. There's no international law that allows you to do this. You stole it. Now you've asked them, how are you going to respond? And I just answered, 91% of England's oil comes out of Qatar. So if the United States was looking to provoke a situation that puts Iran in a position to either back down or to up the ante, I would say they're not going to back down. So there's just way too many things to guess at why Pence's flight may or may not have gone anywhere. So I'll have to pass on, especially my own personal opinion, because it's just an opinion. Then I try to base my opinions on facts. So,
hey, Dave, that's a good point, that the 91% of Britain's oil comes from Qatar. As we've said for quite a while, they need to find, at some point they're going to kick the table over, and they're going to need to find a reason or something that they can point at directly as to, our policies were working, but they didn't work because of XYZ. And is XYZ the Strait of Hormuz being shut down? Very well could be. Who knows?
Well, but again, just to finish that, Bill, because we talked about this before we got on the air. Our thought has always been, since the day we looked at this whole game, the whole financial Ponzi scheme. The whole world functions on a Ponzi scheme, a paper Ponzi scheme, which is why we got into gold. We found Jim early on because he was, for lack of a better word, one of the few people who really were out there, even in the depth of the bear market, trying to wake people up to the fact that the tide was turning. So, as we say now, they need to turn the table over because, as you said, look, we just had great job numbers. Look, everything's just ducky here in America. Car sales numbers were great. No, they're not. House sales numbers are great. No, they're not. So yes, I've always stuck to the theory that they're going to kick the table over, be it financially or with weapons. But it sure appears we're egging on the opposition here. I mean, we just stole a tanker full of oil. If they tit for tatted and stole one of our tankers full of oil, what do you think is going to happen?
They would have already been smoked.
Okay.
One of our tankers.
So are they supposed to sit back with their hands in their pockets while England boarded and stole their tanker? And England obviously did it because we told them, well, go ahead and do it.
Right.
So, again, you better own gold here, people, because this is getting like as strange as it gets. The volatility obviously is starting to show how incredible it is. And, you couldn't have come to a better crew of Bill and Jim to know about the gold market. So, Jim, you have anything you want to add to that?
I'd just like to underscore what Bill said. Our patterns of the past have been when the gold market was, for any reason, targeted for a waterfall. Not only did that waterfall occur, but it followed through on the downside. Now we have the absolute opposite, even on that $25 experience to 15. It's being looked at as a bargain more so than as an item of extreme risk. While general equities, outside of the ones held mainly by the central banks, which is completely, is inexplicable in terms of economic sense, they went the other way. So the table is going to be turned over. It has to be because Trump will not be reelected on a soft economy. This economy over here must and has to be a positive platform for his reelection. Otherwise, take a look at what we're going to have and get a visa to go to Venezuela where it might be nicer. So the table's got to go over, guys, and the table only will go over in the two ways you've suggested, because we're listening to nonsense and we're getting figures that are hokum, and that is not enough to take us through November of 2020. So one way or the other, both already reviewed, that table must go over.
Bill, on July 4th. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I just wanted to add something because when you brought up Judy Sheldon, Judy Sheldon, if she reinstituted the gold standard, would single-handedly crash the United States economy.
Well, crash the world economy.
Okay, correct. So, again, financially, if you want to kick the table over, put this world back on a gold standard, and we'll find out who's really swimming naked. And then you're going to find out who's really standing on the mountain of gold that he's talked about for years and years and years, which is why, why would you sell an asset at a depreciated price if you knew in the future that that asset was going to be worth significantly more?
Therefore, the gold mining companies and the majors don't have a clue what they're mining.
Right, they never have.
Jim, I think that I don't have a lot of faith that these junior and senior miners are even good businessmen. I don't think they have a perspective of what gold is other than a commodity. They might as well be mining corn or soybeans. I don't think they get it,
their
Jim.
Product at all.
You take out of the equation that they have for growth, corruption. And many of the leaders of the gold-rich countries now are starting to wise up that they're better off having a rich country than a different name and living on an island at the end of their lives. Management could get nowhere. Okay, it's literally they are the damnedest dopes that have ever been put in charge of such substantial wealth that they don't even realize.
It's really scary, Jim.
And I talk to them. I see it every day. It's what I watch completely. And it is embarrassing, beyond words, at the decisions they make and the reasons they make them.
Jim, while you're at it, on July 4th, and I know you haven't been able to do a lot of reading, but Egon von Greyerz out of Switzerland wrote a piece cautioning everybody to never let a bank hold your gold. And I had heard you and Jim both say this. And he tells the story of a Swiss bank that literally lost a client's serial numbered bars. Jim, I happen to think that Greyerz was spot on it. So if I understand it, if a bank holds your gold, they can commingle it and do whatever the hell they want to do with it. So, whether it's, what would your suggestions be to listeners as to where to hold their gold? I mean, if a Swiss bank can lose a client's serial numbered bars, my goodness, where do you keep your gold?
Well, you know what, for the listeners, what I believe is the most important lesson, and that is gold is the only savings account there is. And in that sense, the savings account is only real if it's in your hand, because all of the banks which experienced being bailed out by the government no longer can count on something like that happening. Your savings account, which you should think is a Class 1 asset, as gold is, once you open it, becomes not something you own, but rather those papers you sign in opening your bank account make all the money in what you consider your bank account an unsecured loan to the bank, the last in line of bankruptcy for return. The closer it is to your hand, the better off you are. And then we go to the next step. Well, what if I happen to be extraordinarily rich? That's a lot of gold hanging around the house. Then it goes towards making a decision based on the history and character of the people that are in the management of international storage in a location of your choice that offers some degree of political stability. I don't think political safety, because it's probably an oxymoron, but some degree of political stability, as when one judges a country in Africa, you never judge Africa against America, you judge an African company against other African countries in order to determine the most attractive country to be involved in. So the advice in that article is solid and real. The conundrum is, oh great, what do we do? Now, the gentleman who wrote it is in the business of storage, and I consider him to be a very upright individual and a family man. But the greatest temptation, I've spoken to you before, Gold rarely comes out of storage. So if it was my job to go in every day and sit down and see what we got in, what went out, and I realize it never goes out. And I've been working for XYZ Storage Company for 70 years and have gotten pretty good salary, but nothing going to go down in the history books. I didn't get my 180-foot yacht. Why not borrow the pile in the corner? Because if someone else comes to get that, then I'll go over and borrow some potentate's gold, put it in that pile there, and say that's your gold. Oh, the serial numbers aren't the same. You don't give a damn. Just give me the gold. If it's I'll have it analyzed, and I'll be very happy.
Germany got bars back from the I guess it was the New York Fed, and the serial numbers didn't match.
Well, the point that I think to make, even in what you said, Bill, is that gold was not lost, commingled, or somehow
authenticated.
That gold was stolen, and the hypothecation in its the way it's used today is another word for stolen.
Yep.
Where you said, Denny, that some person's gold was misplaced, it was never misplaced. That's the best I ever heard in my life. It was stolen. And if it was misplaced, then they do a total inventory. What would be, and then that 26 bars that are missing would be 26 bars without an owner attached to it. And you give the guy the 26 bars saying, okay, it got mixed up, it got lost, but here's 26 bars, gold is gold, here's a certificate from an assay, be happy. That gold you're talking about got taken, went out the door.
Yeah, but I think the Swiss bank will end up making good on it. But the point is that you got to find better places to store your gold. And I think your lesson, get it as close to as you possibly can.
And hey, Bill, there was a time I'd agree with you that if a Swiss bank would make good on it. And there was a time when Switzerland was Switzerland before it became downtown over-the-counter derivative center. Just because a place is Swiss doesn't give you any more comfort than knowing the ins and outs, the owners, the backgrounds, the civil records, the criminal records of those people that you're dealing with in storage. Storage will eventually be the single largest embarrassment that gold will face in the next 5 years.
Bill, you're the old broker. You've done things that I have not done. You're an ex-broker.
Take it easy on that old stuff, huh?
I think it's old, yeah.
I've been thinking about the end game for a short seller, and there are those that are shorting the heck out of gold. There are those that are shorting the heck out of exploratory mining companies, and even the major mining companies. There's shorts everywhere. In the last few weeks, everything has been going against the shorts. So if you're an ex-old broker, explain what is set up here and how it might play out. What do you? Is there going to be a squeeze here? And explain what a squeeze is.
Well, a squeeze basically once the asset, whether it's gold mining companies, just regular stocks, whatever. A squeeze happens when the price starts to go up, and the margin clerk issues a margin call, and the margin call is not or cannot be met, then that asset gets bought in. It's a buy order. I've said since 2013 that a failure to deliver gold and silver is an event that will absolutely happen, because if you look at the amount of paper ounces, it's in the hundreds per 1 real ounce in existence. So it's a reverse Ponzi scheme, if you will. And they've done it with they've done it in the mining industry. There's huge shorts in the mining industry, and part of the rationale behind that was to shut off the financing window. And of course, if you look at it long term, it doesn't make sense, because if you shut off the financing window for mining companies, that means supply is not going to be coming out of the ground. And what does that do to the supply-demand situation? That ultimately will create the failure to deliver.
David, when Trump first started as president. Go ahead.
Before we go further, I'd like to just add something to what you're talking about there. Jim said to us a long time ago, when I said us, like this is 20 years ago when he was saying these things, that when this gold bull market enters its final phase, the people who were shorted all along, who you thought were your enemies, will ultimately be long the market and running it up. And if you think about in the last 8-10 years what has happened to the gold community, there really is no community. I mean, I know nobody. I know nobody who even thinks about gold anymore. And if you mention it to them, you're like the pariah at the party. And so I never, ever, ever hear people chattering about buying into gold. So the point I'm getting at is they've already worn everybody out. The short problem is offset by the same people who are long 5 times what they're short, is my guess. And as they bleed off their short, they're going to let this price go to numbers that the public won't have any clue. They'll be standing there at the train station watching it leave. So, keep
standing there right now watching it leave, Dave.
That's my point. Jim taught us years ago, did he not, that the biggest shorts would be the biggest longs in the end.
Right.
And Jim, do you still hold that?
Well, one thing we know is that what seemed to be our opposition competition, we've never considered stupid. In fact, their moves have been quite well thought out, strategically for their interests correct in terms of timing. Stupid people don't do intelligent things. Intelligent people don't make the mistake of being on the wrong side of a market, especially when they pull the strings. So you can be sure, once again, that the largest names in international finance, especially the older European families, are now and will continue to be the largest owners of above-ground gold that exist. Yes, they'll make most of the money. Another thing I'd like to add is bear in mind, if a contract doesn't work, a short can't cover. So any idea that the short side of a COMEX contract is the right side to be on, if the COMEX contract goes to $1, there'll be nothing to cover because there's no gold. And that's the reason why, the primary reason why it would happen. It's going to be very difficult for people to understand as the COMEX gold collapses and physical gold rises with a fury, the real market has just become the physical market. That is what is going to give them wild headaches.
This next question I'm going to start with Dave, and Bill and Jim, feel free to jump in. But I want to analyze what Trump has been doing since he started as president. The first thing he did was trash all the multilateral trade agreements, and he has very methodically started building bilateral trade agreements. And at each step, he has removed different players who were worldwide players that seemed to have been controlling all of the trade of the United States. Now, if you go forward then, the budget deficit is increasing. The national debt is ballooning. There is just no limited spending on a government level. So if I take the trade stance of which Trump has had and look at what is obviously taking place on a government level, it seems obvious that this isn't going to end well. So my question is, do you think this is a plan by either the Trump administration, the good guys, or the anti-deep state to take out and destroy the Federal Reserve? Have I jumped too far here that if we get bilateral trade agreements where the central banks can't participate, including the Federal Reserve, and if we blow up our national debt and we spend money like drunken politicians, is this not on track to destroy the Federal Reserve?
No, it's on track to destroy the country. That has been the plan since the creature from Jekyll Isle was hatched. The plan was to indebt everybody and everything so deeply and then pull the plug. And I believe that is the plan, and I believe Donald Trump has been put in office because he's a master at bankruptcy, and the United States is about to go bankrupt. And that is why I'm so concerned with the table getting kicked over, because it's going to be a very unpleasant experience for Americans. I don't believe the central bank is going to cease to exist because, again, if it ceased to exist, that would equate to kicking the table over again because you wouldn't be able to buy a gallon of milk, a carton of eggs. There would be no $28 billion bailing out the farmers all across the Midwest right now, correct?
Everything will stop.
Everything will stop.
Once you have a central bank or central banks, you can't get rid of them because how do you clear anything?
Well said. Systems in place fail to operate. The economy fails to operate. If a check can't clear or a bank wire can't arrive, how exactly do you run a business?
I have no way to quantify this, but my guess is if the central banks were erased tomorrow, within probably 6 months or even less, a third of the world's population would die.
Within the first 6 weeks, you'd have Mad Max.
Yes.
Absolute
after
Mad
72 hours, you'd have Mad Max.
Right, because, Denny, nothing would move. Nothing. I mean, we couldn't exist. You could not exist. Every truck you see on that highway would cease to move.
The only thing that would move, Dave, would be people with junk dimes would be able to get eggs and stuff like that from farmers who have actual real chickens and not contracted wheat or whatever.
Right, but even your mega farms would instantly fail because there would be no fertilizer, there would be no food, there'd be nothing moving because everything relies on a letter of credit to move. You know, within a day or two, the system would seize up. It would be Armageddon. It would be absolute financial Armageddon. And again, that's not an opinion. That's just, again, Bill and I have gone through this factually. That's what would occur. Bill, are we in on
Absolutely.
Is that unconstitutional?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So, we'd be on a barter system in a heartbeat. And that would immediately turn into, I don't have a gallon of gas for my car to even go anywhere. There'd be nowhere to go because nothing would open.
That's why you should have a horse, Dave.
Well, that's why you need a bomb shelter that's stocked. And that's what Jim has talked about forever. You really don't want to go down that road, but in the scenario, Denny, that you're playing, forget it. It's all over. And Jim, why don't I defer to you because we've had these talks about, countries have gone bankrupt. Germany went bankrupt. I mean, Puerto Rico's going bankrupt. Argentina's going bankrupt. Why can't it happen here? Can it?
The Federal Reserve is not the bastion of a solid balance sheet. It is bankrupt. And the point you make about Trump, it's not the art of the deal, it's the art of the steal. He is a master and has used bankruptcy to his own benefit in multiple occasions as part of public record and as anyone in business knows. He's there for a reason, and that reason is we are headed for bankruptcy, but hopefully a controlled bankruptcy, not a market-initiated bankruptcy. And that's why the concept of reset has all of a sudden been heard outside of the three of us, or four of us.
Mainstream is even talking about it.
Exactly. And already there's a construction of possible diversions of the most outrageous nature, which would be on a global scale. Space Force, unidentified flying objects, information released by the U.S. Navy. What in the dickens in the ice is falling out of the ice, melting up on the poles? There is a creation of possible stories that could take our dumbed-down citizens via MSM into hysteria enough to keep them from really seeing the controlled bankruptcy, the first reset, as not being a vehicle capable of setting things straight. The second reset will be market-driven. And the federal and the central banks will become less functioning as they are now, but has been pointed out brilliantly by Bill, the systems which have been set up must continue to operate. In other words, all the systems set up are considered to be sovereign systems and central bank systems. And if tomorrow the central bank all of a sudden wasn't there, like poof, the systems would not be there. You couldn't cash a check. You couldn't wire money transfer. But then let's take a look across the ocean, and especially towards the Silk Road, and see that they're all setting up their own mechanisms in case of what? Failure of central banks in general, or their less effective character. Every bit of that argument, as complex as it is, every bit of the question that led us into this, which is, I have to tell you, Dan, is ultra-complex sets of conditions, leads us into exactly what's happening out there right now. So I'd say that if this was to be considered a group, it should be a group that is known for discussing what's happening now, because it is. It's not going to be in the form of lack of central banks. It's going to be less powerful, less assumed powerful central banks, but they'll be there. The systems must continue or be replaced, and therefore, if they were replaced, that would totally transfer economic strength to other places on the globe. And the developments that are taking place on the military side, on the geopolitical side, are extraordinarily disturbing. And everyone seems to have lost focus of Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act as having been the key to the depression of the 1930s being just that, unstoppable except by a war. So, yes.
I have essentially three questions left. Two of them are demographical, and then, Jim, I've got one last question for you. So, Bill, I'm going to start with you because I assume you're older than Dave, but that may not be the case. I want to talk about the retirement crisis.
My big brother.
Is he? Well, you're still going to get the old people question. Retirement is a crisis that I think is really brewing. The baby boomers are moving towards retirement, and a good percentage of them are simply not prepared for it. Whereas our parents had pensions and Social Security, a pension today is a very, very rare benefit in corporate America. A minority of workers are using their 401k plans, but candidly, they aren't making enough to save a lot. There is constant pressure to maintain the middle-class lifestyle. And, Bill, something big is about to give way here. Can you give me your perspective? Because I can't see this being the Ozzie and Harriet type of retirement that everybody's dreaming of.
Okay, the something big is weakness in markets and also weakness and collapsing values in real estate. People believe that their house is their bank account. People believe that they're going to be able to sell their McMansion, take that capital, downsize, and live until they die. And to this point, that has worked. But you're talking about from a demographic standpoint, you've got baby boomers, by the thousands every day saying, okay, today's the day I retire. And what that does is that's going to put pressure on the sale of stocks, on the sale of bonds, and the sale of real estate. So in other words, everybody's going to be trying to get out the exit door at the same time. And the door has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I guess call it a lack of preparation or bad thought process, because that's what people are retiring on at this point. They're retiring or believing that they're going to retire on stocks and retire on the value of their house. And those values have been blown sky high with the use of credit. And credit is a double-edged sword. So that's...
All right, so that's generation question number one. Dave, I'm going to give you generation question number two. A few years ago, I was doing an evening radio show, and in the studio I had 4 young adults who were all younger than, I think the oldest one was 26 years old. Today, that group is probably in their late 30s. But during the interview with these young kids, I asked the question, if you had to choose between freedom or security, which would you choose? And I was expecting a long discussion. I was expecting that they would all choose freedom since they were all young and vibrant, enjoying the new world after, their college educations were all completed. But all 4 of them, Dave, chose security over freedom. Now, today I'm very sad about how many times American citizens have chosen security over their freedom. And it's not the old folks, although as you get older and older, you do want more security. Dave, my perspective is that we are all being conditioned, including our kids, to give up freedoms month by month by month, year by year by year, so that when the disaster hits, we're going to be controllable. Am I anywhere close, Dave?
100% on, in my opinion. We've been led to that. And if people wanted to look this up, just look up Agenda 21. It's why they're trying to homogenize everything. Because a homogenized society is sheep. It's easier to herd sheep than it is to herd chickens. And if they could just make us all into good little sheep, you're correct. They could have a reset. But we're going to have security. We're going to promise you free education. We got to where we are based on pension promises. Everybody thought they were going to get something. Bill and I have talked about this for over 20 years. That was the biggest scam ever run, and we're going to witness it now. And you saw them dry run it in Greece. They called it austerity there. Listen, you promised people benefits. They did their time. I don't care whether they were a school teacher, a janitor, bus. I don't care whether they cleaned toilets. You had a contract with them. You promised them something. Were they stupid for believing you? Absolutely, because as I said in the beginning of this conversation, governments always lie to their people. There is no such thing as a government that cares about its people. It cares about itself and getting reelected and keeping its power base. So, unfortunately, no, it doesn't surprise me that the kids are where they're at. This has been a pre-plan all along. There's a box in everybody's house that did it to them, and now they've got one in everybody's hand that is doing it to them. So, we got what we deserved. We got what we got lazy. Freedom, correct. Freedom costs something. You have to be involved. You have to think. That's my take on that. Denny, you're on that one.
And Dave, my thought process, and I guess, and I know your thought process, and I guess we think differently. Your freedom allows you to create your own security. But
exactly.
But it's not so in reverse. I mean,
you should put that on, that should be put in granite and hung everywhere.
I would wrap the show up on that, but I've got one more question that I've been saving for Jim. So, last question, Jim. The automobile industry has recently been called Carmageddon. Subprime auto loans gave them a little bit of time, but now it looks like the new car market is about to implode. Ford has had layoffs. The symptoms just don't look good. So continuing on with what Bill just said, debt seems to make all this economy possible. We borrow for cars. We borrow for houses. We borrow for home improvements and vacations. We even borrow for elective medical procedures.
Don't forget McDonald's.
And some folks are even forced to borrow on this week's paychecks before they get them. So, Jim, as much as I hate to say it, and I've heard you all say it, I really think the fuse is lit. But is it possible to wean America off debt, this addiction to debt? Jim, are we just past it? It's not going to be possible.
Well, you're past it. I mean, we and I mean others have taken such a strong hallucination-producing drug called credit that without it, how would they function? And Lord help them if somebody wants to have it paid back, because that will be what would create the Jubilee, because it simply can't be paid back. So we are a nation and world of junkies. The drug is debt. It can't be pulled out from under people's feet, and that's why they'll try and go first for a controlled bankruptcy and reset, and secondarily the forces of economics, which are nature's laws, will come into play, and the first reset will be turned upside down by the marketplace. And that is not Wall Street, and that is not the comics. When I say the marketplace, I mean worldwide demand for assets not attached to liabilities. And it's going to happen, and it is happening. And we opened up by commenting, Bill did, on the action of the gold markets in the last few weeks, underscoring the fact that they're not able to get the follow-through runaways on the downside that they were able to get up to now by negative PR on assets not attached to liabilities.
Hey, Jim,
guys, you did it.
Back
Go
in
ahead,
the old
Bill.
days, when I say the old days, I'm talking when me and Dave met and then first started following you. You know, we'd have a run-up for a few weeks or 5 or 6 weeks in gold, in the mining shares, and then all of a sudden there'd be this big waterfall, and I can just tell you my personal emotions at that point was, oh, well, that's great. Now it's going to be like another 2 or 3 months before we even get back to where we were 2 days ago. And it was, I mean, this is the reason that it was done, was to try to crunch or crash people mentally. And that definitely has changed. I mean, to see two-way action that's the biggest change I've seen in the last 20 years.
And what you're seeing is for real, and not just a temporary, elusive hallucination of the marketplace. That is for real. And Friday was your best example.
Yeah, Bill, you just described what Richard Russell used to call the tidal actions, and he talked about the great bull markets and the great bear markets, and that the tide would come in, and if you stick a stake at the highest level of the water, then the tides would move out, and there would be these long-term processes. And I had that same feeling when we would see that great big waterfall event where the markets would just fall over, and just the frustration of, doggone it, we got this far. Maybe that has been broken. I hope it has, because quite frankly, it was used surreptitiously, well, not so surreptitiously, but just to hold the markets down and fight what the real case for gold was. So, guys, you were terrific today. Golly gee, all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, this might have been our best call we've done so far. And Denny, I want to commend you. Your questions are getting better.
Thank you, boss. Does that mean they were terrible before? No, thank you very much. I work hard on those.
Thank you
Dave,
very much.
Have you got anything else for the soup, Dave?
No, thank you very much. Again, all we're trying to do is open people's eyes. You got to learn to think for yourself, because this is getting weirder by the day out there. And, Jim has tried to teach people for 20 years, be your own central banker, because as you can see, as this game unfolds, they can get up and devalue the dollar 25% overnight. And what are you going to do about it? Literally, what are you going to do about it?
You better have a plan B.
Yeah, you better have a plan B. Because, the President of the United States is out there saying what? And I said to
China,
Bill,
if you don't cooperate, we're going to cream the dollar.
Yeah, I got to say, I kind of cringed. I think it was the 4th of July speech where he was saying, this might be the greatest economy the nation's ever had, and I turned the TV off. It just, I don't know,
Bill, have you got anything
that
else?
goes along with the brand new F-22s.
Yeah.
Bill, anything else you want to add before I turn it over to the Great White Father?
No, I think we did a good job today. This was fun.
Well,
It
Jim,
was fun,
we send you
fellas.
blessings.
Best time I've had in the last 3 days.
We know what you've been through, so God bless you.
It's another thing too, but it's temporary. Nothing of concern to me.
Well, listen, guys. Same time, same station next week. But in the meantime, stay out of jail.
All right. In Qatar, definitely in Qatar. Someday we'll tell people that joke.
Yeah. All right, boys. You have a good week now.
You too.
Thank you very much, fellas. Bye-bye.